meeting of the boot camp. We have several members here who were not able to be here the last time we met, but probably the most premier member here is one of our own, Kenneth Ferguson, who is from Pine Bluff, or represents Pine Bluff. He is not officially on the boot camp committee, but came anyway because he cares about it. And just because I didn't know if Blake Johnson was going to make it, Blake, and I hadn't seen you all the way from Corning, so thank you very much. And if you don't mind, would you just the rest of the legislators here just call out your names on folks?
Be glad to.
Okay.
Another local is Mike Holcomb, Harlan Bro, Carol Dalby, Stu Smith. Did any other House members? Oh, Brianne Davis.
Brianne Davis from the Senate, and then we got James Knox.
You're passed up. I didn't see her. And then she introduced Blake.
Mentioned Blake. I was so happy to see you.
So it's great to have you guys. I think we've got one or two more that are, there's Ken.
Ken, I already talked about you, so you missed your opportunity to come. And we're doing all of this. I mean, there are a lot of connections here today. We've had to let the newspaper try to make this work. And I want to be sure that we give thanks to the folks from our Kansas County Arts, because they're the ones who made all this work, and the people who work here that I'm sure Dr. Schultz will say something about later on. And if anything goes wrong today, one of the things that's going to be a good demonstration is whether or not we have sufficient broadband all over the places we're connected so people can stay connected to this meeting. That's a lesson in itself. If anything goes wrong today, I want you to understand this is emblematic of the issues we have with broadband that will, if we're not really careful and get on board with this, all of the things that are possible for us to do through this boot camp will be compromised if we don't have great broadband. And for anybody else who doesn't know, Les and I are the chairs of the boot camp. And the thing that we did first of all was create an art caucus. We were very deliberate about being bipartisan. Les is a Democrat and I'm a Republican. Is that right? Oh, yeah. No, I'm just kidding with you. It's the other way around. It's the other way around. It's the other way around. But we did this on purpose. And then, of course, I know at least Carol Galby is here, who was a founding member of the caucus. Carol is from Texarkana. And we did the same thing with the members of the caucus. There are 8 art districts.
Brianne was too.
And yeah, Brianne was too. We were careful. So we had 8 senators, 8 representatives, 8 Democrats, 8 Republicans, because this is not about politics. This is about economic development. That's the whole point. And so with all that said, we'll turn over to people who really know what they're talking about. But throughout the presentation today, it's Les's turn to share all of this. So we'll just follow the agenda. And if there's anything else we need to say, clear up.
The other thing I want to point out is, and this was one thing that I got really excited about. I grew up in Arkansas. I've lived in 5 different places in Arkansas, so I am just pro-Arkansas. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we accomplished is, as we visit the different places in Arkansas with our boot camps, is that we take note of what it is in each of our communities that is helping drive the economic engine for Arkansas via the arts. And we're wanting to put together a brochure that says, when you're in Arkansas, here's some other things to consider. If you go to Crystal Bridges in Northwest Arkansas, we don't want you just to go to Crystal Bridges and then leave the state. We want you to stay in the state and go see the other art-related activities that are special, but maybe you hadn't heard about them. So we want to give you a list so that you can spend several days in Arkansas. So.
Yeah, and a second part of this, and that just reminds me, I should say this as well. A second part of this is growing something that in a place where there is not a Crystal Bridges, where we can be in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, in the Delta, and we know that they're with Art and Technology Merit, is the Art and Technology Boot Camp, to discover and grow right here where people are. This whole idea is not to look for the next big factory that's going to come along, but through the combination of art and technology, grow economic development all over the state. That is our charge, to give to you. I won't get a chance to be back, but when we come back, we will hand you something, as Les said, we will hand you a report that says, this is what you should be looking at in Southeast Arkansas to grow the economy. This is what you ought to be looking at in Southwest Arkansas to grow the economy. And stop this thing of looking at a place and saying, there's just nothing there. But by George, when we finish this, we're going to give you a map that says, here it is. You go get it. And I'll be watching from the outside.
And then I'll add one more thing, and this is really neat because today I was visiting with some of our speakers before, and when we think of arts, we think singing, dancing, filming, music. And there's a guy that will speak today that's going to talk about art in a different format than I think we think of art. So I'm excited to see the program today, so looking forward to what you're about to
Dr.
present.
Schultz, want to come on
Dr.
up?
Schultz.
Here you go.
Oh, I'm just so tickled. Thank you so much for being here. So first I want to acknowledge Mayor Shirley Washington. I want to acknowledge and thank Dr. Chandra Taylor of the ERDC, the space that we're in. She's been wonderful. Thank you. Terry Story, Executive Director of the Pine Bluff Advertising and Promotion Commission. And Randy with UAPB TV, thank you so much for being here. So that for this momentous event, he's going to put together a montage of our afternoon. Audio, you can tell we're sort of camping here. We're kind of putting things together. That means every single sound is feeding through, including to our Zoom. Because we have people zooming in from all over the state, possibly even from some of your colleagues in Florida. And by the way, we also have people on that Zoom from the Arkansas Barbecue Trail, the Arkansas Quilt Trail, East Labs, Economics Arkansas, Arkansas Department of Education, and many others. So there are a lot of people very interested in the work that you're doing. The location that we're in is very deliberate. The effort for downtown economic development on this block goes back, what do you think, those 30 years? How long ago was this building? The 90s, I think it came in, Arts and Science Center in the 90s. And as you're going to find out shortly, then the buildings in between got filled in thanks to the Arts and Science Center, Dr. Rachel Miller over there. So the streetscape's already completed down, then the streetscape will be up here. So you're actually witnessing some many decades of economic community development right here. James Hayes, this is art class. Many of you are already familiar with his work. Is a perfect example of art and business. He grew up in Pine Bluff. He has his art class studio in Pine Bluff. And quite honestly, his work is absolutely everywhere. Art really does mean business. I am out of order. I'm going to introduce Dr. Richard Bailey, who is the chairman of the music department at UAPB, and he's going to address digital music, shall we say, digital recording technologies.
You had asked me to speak to music and technology and some of the fields that, sure, some of the fields that are available in music. And I was saying that, what's old is new again, what's new is old again. A lot of what's going on with technology in music is to support more traditional programs, but to make resources available to people who might not necessarily have had them, either because of cost or accessibility. For example, on this iPad, I have music that I can perform with an ensemble. I have where did it go? I have an application here which will tell me if I'm singing or playing in tune or not, or if I'm playing in tempo, and if I'm not, it gives me that very curious look, like what are you trying to do there? There are also applications that will accompany me and allow me to practice improvisation or performance. And of course this is all on an iPad or on an iPhone. On my watch I have an application that tells me if the environment I'm in is too loud and could be damaging my hearing. And as a musician, your ears are your most important tool because they're everything that you need, and they're the only ones you have. You can't replace them. I should say that our students who graduate with a Bachelor of Science in music with areas in teaching, performance, and sound technology have gone on to do some really great things. Some of them you might expect. We have students that are working in top flight recording studios in Chicago and Atlanta, working with artists like Missy Elliott, Kanye, Chance the Rapper. We have students that have recently toured with Demi Lovato, Jordan McGraw, Beyonce, performed on the B.B. King's Blues Cruise all over the world. I'm a little jealous about some of the places that they get to go. We also have students that have gone on to other graduate programs. One of our recent grads is a licensed music therapist working at a hospital in Los Angeles, working in healthcare through music. And one of my last students before I moved from being the head of our music technology program to the department chair, went on to a master's program in sound design at the Savannah College of Art and Design. And he has a lot of credits to his name already. His most recent one, he was the principal music editor on the Marvel film Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings. He's worked on a number of high-level projects. We're kind of working his way up from assistant to lead music editor and sound engineer with these programs. So there are a lot of things happening, and some of the current research that's really exciting is interactivity in music, where the external world can trigger musical installations, interactivity, so that people maybe who are compromised in some way can still interact with music and make music through more non-traditional ways, just as people who might have speech or hearing challenges can still communicate through the use of a computer. So there's a lot going on just in the development of applications that will work in very traditional ways, but also that can expand the opportunities for people in music who might not have the resources or the traditional capabilities that we would otherwise expect. So that's really what we're doing here. We have a wonderful studio where we're teaching students everything from basic recording to surround sound mixing, editing, composition, music production, that sort of a thing. And we're really pleased to be a part of this community and interacting with the Arts and Science Center, with Arkansas for the Arts. And as Representative Elliott was saying, connectivity is really a major key to further growth of the arts and the ability for people to interact with musicians literally all over the world in ways that were unthinkable just 5-10 years ago.
So what I'm thinking about immediately is, what do we have to build so that the students don't have to leave Arkansas to do the same things right here in our state that they're leaving the state to do? I mean, that's on us. That's the kind of thing we would talk about in our report. Here's what's possible, here's what we don't have, so we can have it right here in our own state.
Well, I mean, the reality is that I've actually seen, in studios all across the state, instances where somebody might be recording say a commercial for a business in Texas. The producer is in Chicago, the voice talent is in North Carolina, the recording studio is in Arkansas, and again, it's all due to the ability for people to connect in real time and utilize the technology to basically be in the same room with somebody who's across the world. And I think, obviously this last 2 years with all of our Zoom meetings and all of that, we've gotten more accustomed to those ideas. The key with music is the speed of communication, because it's crucial that there not be a lag when you are interacting with other artists, other musicians in real time.
I guess my question is, what has been your biggest obstacle with your technology, your music technology, and like the application? What's the biggest obstacle that y'all have come up against?
Well,
I mean, you just talked about the lag. I mean, are you experiencing lags when you're trying to connect with others, or is there something else also that you're trying to minimize?
I would say the lag is specific in a lot of ways to the practice of music. Because of how we perceive sound and tempo and that sort of thing, even a delay of milliseconds can throw off the timing between musicians as they're playing together. So real-time interaction really requires very high-speed data communications and that sort of thing. So when we're talking locally or something outside of real time, where I can do something and then you can do something and we can put it all together, those kind of collaborations are happening. But one of the things that even the most connected musicians in the world were experiencing during the pandemic is that you can't have a jam session with somebody who's 50 miles away unless you both have really strong connections and that sort of thing. So as those types of opportunities increase, especially as broadband accessibility and reliability increases, then you can have somebody playing in real time, in Little Rock with somebody in Pine Bluff, with somebody in Monticello, those sorts of things, possibly even as far as Conway or Fayetteville or Jonesboro, those sorts of things. So. So again, I guess that's really the obstacle is distance, and just making sure that there's enough access for as many people who want it and need it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Richard Bealey. And notice that we're used to seeing musical instruments. Look at the musical instrument. So the whole computer setup over there is actually the instrumentation.
Yeah.
So we also have an entirely different look nowadays. Now, if I advance this, is this one going to?
While we're waiting, I want to acknowledge another one of our senators is here, Senator Ben Gilmore. Welcome. You get to sit and play, so it's all good.
I'm telling you, you had such a long drive, you couldn't read anyway.
That's the way it goes, isn't it?
Just a few long strokes.
That's what I'm going to be at. So this indicates the growth of the creative economy. You can see it's dated 2013 to 2017, but if this is general growth at 8%, 9.6 is the creative economy. So even back then, you had a faster growing creative economy. And as we go forward, you're going to find that it's even more so that the creative sector is accelerating. I want to think about just one of those sectors, which is movies. Because during the pandemic, the Netflix, the Hulu, the Disney, the Prime, I mean, the list goes on and on. But I want you to think about the writers that are part of those productions, the videographers, costumers, sets, props, special effects. And then the peripheral industries of transportation, catering, security, that's just one industry. And the goal of the whole thing of growing this creative economy is more jobs, more business, and that creative thinking attracts talent and opportunity. And those people then actually want the restaurants, the bike trail, the family activities. So it has concentric circles of growth. Art and technology is sitting at the crossroads of the future, but it's not just for this isn't the first time because it's constantly changing. So let's use movies again as an example. Movies really started with animation all the way back with rapid images. Then film went to a piano in a theater accompanying it. Then it went to sound movies. Black and white went to color. Film went to digital. And now you can do a movie on your cell phone. So in each one of those points, that was a new technology. So the whole thing to hold on to is the idea that adaptation. We really want to teach adaptation and how do you keep adapting to new ideas and new technologies that come along. And the way to do that is have more art in technology and more technology in art. And when we're talking about the arts, we're not just talking about painting and dancing, we're talking about the idea that students who are in the arts actually end up in STEM careers. They get higher test scores, they are more engaged, they stay in school longer. So the idea here isn't that we want more painters and dancers and actors, although that would be great. The idea is actually what that teaches that student in general. And just kind of think about it. Realize what it takes to be a musician, how much work it takes that goes into it. So that stick-to-itiveness, that constant practice are great skills that are applied in other fields. And during the pandemic, I was my grandson's teacher. He's 7. And I can tell you that the way that they're learning is all through art and technology. They think that they're video games or these little animation things, but they're learning math and reading. They are crazy fun. But if you look at it through the lens of art and technology, it's all art and technology. Not one of those education things that he's doing is made here in Arkansas. Yet. So, tomorrow's workforce is all about collaboration. Project teams today are made up of people from all different specialties and backgrounds. You're going to see engineering in the arts, healthcare in the arts, agriculture in the arts, and more. We grow the creative economy by supporting existing businesses, developing tomorrow's entrepreneurs, building the workforce, retaining talent, and attracting talent. And you might guess I have a bunch of different ideas on how we do that, but in the interest of time, this is how we went about actually surveying what's going on here in Arkansas. So, I want to point out that the arts districts are different than your legislative districts. So there's going to be slight variations there. We conducted a survey asking what's your intersection with art and technology, what barriers exist, what's your future plans and dreams. And this is what we found. First of all, we had about a 10% response rate. We next invited participants to participate in focus groups. We had about a 40% response rate. The largest findings, funding and broadband. So we then said, all right, we know that funding and broadband are the two biggest obstacles. So let's set that aside for a moment. We will make that abundantly clear, every possible opportunity. But what else? What is it that can actually build the creative economy through your particular area? What they said, there is an overarching need for art and technology education, pre-K all the way through elders, through every single aspect of education, every aspect of society, because as we pointed out, the technology is constantly changing, the art is constantly changing, and people crave lifelong learning. Play, experimentation, inquiry-based learning is critical for that learning of creative problem solving. So that time when kids are just playing and it looks like just play, that's really important to that process that later on is going to be implemented in real problem solving. We need equal access and diversity across the state. It can't be just one region that actually thrives. And we're going to get into the research later. Sandy Martin is our research guru, and you're going to see some startling numbers that she's going to point out, because she's got all the research for this area, every county here. We need a communication network where people can locate each other and find each other so that they can do grants together, collaborate together, projects together. This is our focus group that we conducted.
And I am the interpretive coordinator for the Pine Bluff Advertising and Promotion Commission, and I am also the executive director of Delta Rhythm and Values Alliance. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to building out the travel corridor between Pine Bluff, Arkansas and Greenville, Mississippi. There's a rich legacy of music, art, and value stories in that area. It has the longest bayou on the planet that runs parallel to Highway 65, and that is Bayou Bartholomew. There's a lot of folklore, a lot of history, a lot of culture connected to that. But unbeknownst to many, there's also a lot of artistic legacy, particularly in folk music, that has not been brought to the public's attention. And so our job is to try to marshal that story, that collective story between Greenville, Pine Bluff, and creative tourism.
I'm Sherry Story. I'm the director for the Pine Bluff Advertising and Promotion Commission, which is the governing body for Explore Pine Bluff. I would like to see technology to be put into the hands of our visitors in Pine Bluff, and this could be everything from interactive exhibits at our museums and attractions, interactive touchscreen kiosks in our information center. I would love to see perhaps even a digital technology, using digital technology to create a video wall, maybe 1 or 2 walls in the city of Pine Bluff to use as big changing canvases for storytelling and the arts that we're trying to develop. But, you know, there's so many things that I think we can do in Pine Bluff as we're building out our cultural assets here in Pine Bluff, that we can bring technology in to enhance the visitor experience.
Art and technology together just makes sense to me. As a public school art teacher, there's not a lot of technology available to us. You know, somebody may give us a Chromebook card or an iPad, but as far as giving Adobe Suite and teaching creative entrepreneurship as a career path, I think is a place where I'd like to explore and see something happen, because I think in terms of public education, we tend to teach kids that you can be a fine artist, and that's it. There are so many other careers available, and so I'd like to explore how we can teach more technology-based arts career paths.
The Generator, which is an innovation power model for Pine Bluff. Our focus is entrepreneurship and digital skills. And so we have an East initiative space now at the Generator. Obviously, East is education accelerator through service and technology. So we are technology-based. We also have a mini maker space at the Generator. For us, using the Generator as a platform to really raise the level of digital skills, and then trying to bring that across to the entrepreneurship space. So what technology brings to the market is scalability, right? If you create a technology-based business, that's very scalable. And if you bring technology to Main Street businesses, they can become very scalable.
I also teach digital photography classes. We teach graphic design courses at UAM that just recently began a few years ago. Just received a grant to build a lab there, so our students again have difficult having access to technology away from the campus. We want to branch those classes out eventually to include web design, animation.
As for AAC, our focus has been for many years science engineering, arts, and mathematics. We focus on STEAM in all of our programming, from visual arts to theater. And we also have a STEAM studio that mainly focuses on K through 12, but we have our audience is mainly K through 9th grade. It's usually that's the group of students that come through. We are expanding our campus. We now have 2 new facilities, Art Space on Main and Artworks. And the purpose of the Art Space on Main in particular is to provide more space, more opportunity for the community as well as the Southeast region to participate in workshops with people that are in the creative industries. And to specifically introduce to our students, younger students, what that ecosystem looks like. And who's all a part of that besides, like as Troy mentioned, you always think about fine arts. And we're trying to go past the artist and look at the system that supports the artist, all the different industries and careers and whatnot. And we like to focus on how the visual arts and tech intersect. And that also includes, our recent collaboration with CR, that's with the welding tech students, showing how welding is a form of creative industry.
But there are communities where essentially musical maker spaces are being developed, where small little sound labs are available at either a public library or at some other community center, where someone with a relatively small amount of training can just go in and experiment and create and record.
The new facility, Artworks on Main, there is a black box theater, and that would be a really cool collaboration to have some digital music with a digital artist in that space. I can definitely see the Arts and Science Center collaborating with everybody. We're working with Sherry on the digital canvas. I think that's an amazing idea. Working with Mildred on how to, get the students that she works with and the students that we work with and figure out how we're able to provide non-traditional tech experiences for these students. We know that we're not really getting that, even though Troy is working at East Lab. Not every student has access to East Lab. Whitehall is an exception. So I think it'd be an awesome opportunity to find ways outside the classroom that we can connect the K through 12 students to non-traditional forms of technology and those experiences. We talked to Explore Pine Bluff about incorporating them into that Smithsonian project, the YES project, which was technology, visual arts, and tourism all put together in a project with Pine Bluff High School and Whitehall East Lab students.
We are always looking at who else can we engage that can better facilitate our vision of what we have. Change is so constant. It absolutely requires creative thinkers. They help us to see what's possible and what may be obvious to them, but we're oblivious to. It's coming to cities and saying we got to look at something differently. How can we incorporate new elements in public policy that would help change the status quo?
I have an art and tech fellowship where we bring artists from across the state, from Arkansas, but outside the region, outside of the United States, to come in and do community workshops as a part of the fellowship program. So the fellowship would be funded by some sort of endowment. And I think when it comes to Pine Bluff and the southeast region of the state, it is really receptive to the concept or the idea of working with artists within their community and taking those artists and finding where they can cross over into the classroom would be awesome.
Pine Bluff has had some times, but we are coming back strong and hard, and the planning and everything that's going on, the whole state, the whole legislature know that not only Pine Bluff, but the lower Delta is planning stuff that's going to knock your socks off. Think about the Delta, and think about parts of the state where there hasn't been as much focus on facilitating those dollars that relate to not only art, but to workforce development, Okay, go, Pete.
Howard. The thing that always strikes us when we've gone around the state with the focus groups, as well as the other conversations that we've had, is you notice the different narrative and the different language that these creative people are using. It's about product development, it's about research, it's about career, it's about education, it's about everything else but a paint can and a blank canvas. Dr. Oates was, or Dr. Bailey, I'm sorry, was talking about his thing that chances are all of us or most of us are going to go to the store and buy one application that has something to do with music or video or whatever. And the magic is not so much in that product. The magic is in the creative and the collaboration that's behind that you just got a behind the scenes look at from Dr. Bailey. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about arts and technology and creative economy. We're talking future and money, and the potential is incredible. I mean, I first want to thank Jimmy and Sherry and everybody that participated in this. You have some dynamite stuff, so congratulations to you. So the board stuff, and before I start, I also want to acknowledge that Patrick Ralston, who's director of the Arkansas Arts Council, is here as well, sitting by the mayor, so thank you. That's a good match on that. So I get to do the boring stuff that I love, because it's really not boring if you kind of, I like to say, flip the turtle over and look at the soft side of it. The data research, and you got it in your packets, and I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of boring time going over it, but I want to just explain a little bit about the highlights and what it means. This is from a software program that we have, a database program called Creative Vitality Suite. It is from the West Staff people out in LA, very highly credible. They pull from only authentic, credible sources, Bureau of Labor, IRS, Census Bureau. It's as current information as you can get right now. It's 2019. They will, by January, have the 2020 information in it. What we can do is go into the creative economy. We can look at it in a variety of different industries in different segments. What we did here was Southeast Arkansas, what is the general potential status and current picture of the creative economy? First thing they do is up in the corner, they put a creative vitality index. What that means is, what is the vitality and the potential that is within this particular region. The state of Arkansas is only operating at 51% of its potential. Southeast Arkansas is only at 0.20. You'll be shocked at when we go into the breakdowns of the different counties on how low those scores are. Now, here's what's interesting, and here's what you need to focus on. The creative economy is here. It's just not being either connected, supported, understood, brought together in a room, at a table to do things like you're hearing now, like you saw. I mean, the spark within an hour Zoom meeting and the collaborations that were created within that last 15 minutes, really, right, Lenore? I mean, it was incredible. And that's all it takes to get this economy going. And they're talking product development, they're talking education, they're talking service development, they're talking new career paths that really could set Arkansas apart. So this next section breaks down what those creative occupations are and how they're growing. We can drill this down and actually look at hourly wages, average wages, and annual salary. The next section is a snapshot of the industry sales. That's the total creative economy industry sales. It's almost $151 million. That's nothing to sneeze at. But when you look at the 0.20 and you look at what you've got here, and you've got universities and other people here, man, this area as Jimmy said, it's going to knock your socks off, but really harnessed, this is an incredible, incredible region. And then this gives you a nonprofit view separating from the for-profit view. Then we break down, this is Jefferson County, the Pine Bluff area, same thing. You see Pine Bluff is better at a 0.23 with its CDI. The musicians, obviously, sculptures. I mean, the potential, and when you look at each of those regions in the county, and you start doing a collaborative effort across the potential businesses that are here, and creative people that are here, potential is incredible. And again, sales in Pine Bluff alone, $67 million. Then you have the rest of the counties. We decided to go ahead and do all the counties within the region. And you can look at these at your leisure, but you can see up here in the indications of the ones that have lost. That, and I got to tell you, it doesn't take that much to lift it back up. It really doesn't. Also, I want to share, overlaying on this, Dr. Shelley House is on the Zoom. She is the new person at the Department of Education with Arts, and they started about a year ago a dashboard, an interactive dashboard about arts. And if you can overlay in each of the counties what the arts enrollment is for K through 12, this region has some of the highest in the state. But they fall off between middle school and high school. So what's the opportunity there that you can kind of bring them back in, or say, maybe you started in visual arts in middle school, let's get you into this digital track in middle school. Let's get you thinking differently. Let's get that mindset going. So, that's another layer of potential that we have here. But you can see the variations and the differences. One of the counties is like a 0.10. But again, there's talent here. There's creative economy just waiting to be unleashed. So that's my blind. Does anybody have any questions before we turn it back over to?
I have a question really for our chair, because you're education.
Right. I'm vice chair.
Vice chair. Is the drop-off between middle school / junior high and high school because of the credits that are required for graduation, that starts narrowing in high school, or have we increased that? I just don't know.
Yeah, that's a very good likelihood that the requirements that we have placed on what it takes to graduate, we have in a lot of ways not lifted up all of some of the things that we've been talking about that we need in the back for students to think differently and to be able to create careers that we don't even think of. It's an issue. And that's one of the reasons it's great to have the education folks on here, because one of the things we failed to do that we could do to make some of these things work, we can create schools of innovation in these districts. That's actual legislation that I got passed a number of years ago. You can create a district of innovation. You can create a school of innovation to do things differently. So we think about job and training. We don't think about this. We think about these big outfits and stuff, and that's all well and good. But that's just not where the future is going. We need people to build big things maybe. But yeah, that's a problem.
So I would like to introduce Associate Professor and Chair of the University of Central Arkansas Department of Geography. Dr. Stephen O'Connell has been working at the intersection of geographic information systems, history, and geography.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the chance to come talk to everybody here in person and online in the Zoom meeting. And I appreciate Lenore inviting me. And I'm really glad she brought up something in her talk about the history of movies and music, because part of what I want to talk about today is actually a little bit of the background of where I come from as a geographer. I was a geographer before I knew I could be a geographer. I went to school, I didn't realize that was something you could do. But when I got to school, I realized that I've always been a geographer, and there's something about that. There's an intersection of both arts and technology in the discipline of geography. And there's something about where we are in that intersection currently that I think really speaks to the possibilities that we have in all the things that we've talked about. There are a couple of key topics I want to hit today, but I did like that beginning that Lenore had about that history, because I want to go into that history of what exactly it means to be a geographer. I talk to my students all the time, asking them, looking at that word and thinking about what exactly does that mean. Most people think to learn about the world or to study the world, but in fact, if you go to the ancient Greek, it's actually earth description or earth writing. And that's, if we went back 2,300 years ago to Eratosthenes, who coined that term, that's where it comes from. And the original geographic pursuits were all about describing places that people were visiting. It was about the descriptive narrative of place. Now, throughout history, we've talked about that as geographers through visual art forms, through maps. Whether we're going back to Anaximander's kind of very rough rendition of the world, 600 years BC, or looking at Ptolemy's a little bit more scientific map, they're all about trying to place people's perception of where they were in the world currently. As maps progressed, the technology to create them increased, but that meant that people started to tell stories about the places they were in. Maps were pieces of art. The map of Mundis of the medieval Europe, they had depictions about place. They had depictions about the communities people were making those maps from. As we expanded into the period of exploration, maps changed because the purposes of maps changed. Maps were meant as navigational tools. Art was still part of the map, but it was often off to the sides. We started to get depictions of sea monsters and the four winds in the corners. But the maps themselves were meant as navigational tools, as instruments of technology, as we added things like the compass, the sextant, the astrolabe. We all added that component to the maps. Fast forward to today, and what I teach my students is in the realm of GIS, Geographic Information Technology, where we take all of the different components of the world, all of the different components of the landscape that we have outside, and each one is isolated as a distinct layer. That layer tells a story. We're describing the Earth in each different component. But it's all built in this world of technology. It's built with huge amounts of data, with computer programs that we train our students in. They go out into the workforce and they're trained to analyze that data. They're trained to be able to take raw information from the landscape and create depictions of those places. Maps can still be a piece of art, though, but we tended to, in my discipline, we tended to focus on the technological skills that it takes to make those maps. And for most of the last couple of centuries, people who have been involved in map making have been technological experts. But they haven't always been really good at expressing that old version of geography, that old version of describing about and writing about the narrative of place. And there's an opportunity for us today with the fact that most of these technologies, they were kind of isolated and behind a wall of education, of skill. But now most mapping technologies are available to anybody. You all have GIS if you've got one of these in your pockets. Creating an opportunity to get people who can create those maps about where they are gives us an opportunity to blend the narrative of place and the technology of modern mapping. There's an aspect of geography, for me as a historical geographer, there's an aspect of that goes back to what we talk about in geography as these ideas of technology and maps, where we can create moments about place. These are kind of examples of how we can utilize these technologies to create relatively straightforward maps about information. This is a map showing traffic cams in a city in California. This is a map of key sites in Omaha, Nebraska. Again, these are just simply descriptions about things that are going on in a place. For me, though, there's an aspect of the storytelling that's part of this. This goes to what in my realm of geography is referred to as sense of place. An idea that we are connected to the communities that we are either from or that we have a long-standing connection to. In geography, there's a term called topophilia, love of a place. This is often something related to where our families were from, where we spent a lot of time. It could be where we live now. It doesn't always have to be. For me, not being a native Arkansan, my connection, what is the place that I most connect to, that I most vividly reminded myself in my head, is the New Jersey shore, of all places. Because I grew up going to Ocean City, New Jersey as a kid every summer. I haven't been there in 25 years, but I can still smell that brine air whenever I think about it. Everybody has one of those places. Everybody has some connection to those locations. What we have to capture is our ability to translate that into a digital view. This is a process that we refer to in modern community development as placemaking. Being able to capture that sense of place. That's a personal thing. But if we do it right, we can transform that so that other people can understand the significance of that location. There are all sorts of pieces in terms of community development, tourism promotion, that folks like Sherry and the A&P Commission in Pine Bluff already know about this. They create imagery. They create a narrative about community. They can create that sense of place. If you look at the Explore Pine Bluff website, you can see snippets, and you can look anywhere across the state to find the same thing. Communities across the state know what it is that people understand to be the key identity for their community or for their region. The great process with this, from my perspective, looking at it as a geographer, is that we can utilize the narratives that people already know about their community and build that as a bridge between that narrative and the technology of GIS and of map making. There are already instances where maps in these communities can make connections. This is an example from Springfield, Missouri, showcasing the path of the historic Route 66, showcasing the old architecture, some still there, that tells you a little bit about the history of that place. Something that people who visit Springfield can open on their phones and get a look at what could be happening in those locations. Something that they might visit if they're in town. Something a little bit broader, this is a program that looks at the Underground Railroad, and it showcases a summer field course that has been offered over the last 20 years, and just documents some of the different sites that people visit. Creating a narrative tied to specific communities or specific events. One of the ones that we've kind of developed up on campus with a couple of honor students and myself that I think has already been shown, using the New Deal post office murals throughout Arkansas as an example, showcasing the art that is already in the communities we live in. This art is there, but not everybody knows about it. Using this technology to bridge that gap, even for people who live in those communities that may not be aware that those things are right under their noses. This is an opportunity. We have already started conversations with Sherry and the A&P Commission to bring on UCA students to help look at, in particular here in Pine Bluff, some of the historic architecture that's here. There is all sorts of available information, all of the old maps that are available. We can look at examples from the historic Sanborn maps, all sorts of information about buildings that were existing at various points throughout history in Pine Bluff. So in these maps, it's just a series of maps looking a couple blocks north of here towards the courthouse. But we can document that history and create that interactive blend between the culture and arts that are here in our communities and the modern technologies that students that I teach are craving to know, but find an opportunity to merge those two different concepts together in this idea of placemaking for our communities across Arkansas. That's all of my comments. I would like to thank Lenore and Sherry, as well as several of my colleagues up on UCA's campus.
Thank you.
So for those of you who are in Little Rock, remember the old church's GIS thing? Ta-da! With Steve and his honor students over right across the finish line. He is the man, which is why we brought him here today. So super duper thanks, because yes, indeed, there's going to be an intern from UCA that's working with Pine Bluff on historic buildings, and they're going to be starting anytime. And so I want you to know that this is not just a bunch of tough. I wonder what we could do. This is like, get in there, let's see what we can do, let's make these connections, and we're ready to do it. So we are now going to go, oh, yes?
Are we only dealing with the historic markers here in Pine Bluff, or is it across the state?
Ultimately, across the state. The only reason why this one came about is because the first boot camp was going to be here, and actually because I worked here for 10 years, and I happen to just like know the place really, really well, and also know that there's so much treasure here that's been ignored. So when the first thing happened, we brought them in, connected them, and guess where we're going next? We're going to rise up from here. We're going to go down to the Pine Bluff A&P Commission. We're going to enter through there, and then we're going to go visit the Arts and Science Center, Art Space, and Artworks. And then after that tour, we're going to go right down the block to the dinner. Is there anything else you need to do housekeeping-wise here? Because we can lock up here, correct? And then come back on our way back? I'm getting yes.
We're going to end up here.
Can we end up back here?
Because if not, we can do the housekeeping right now, but I want to be sure that we do that.
You want to do that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, here's the thing, Les, that I think we need to do. There are some people who probably have not signed in. I'm one of them. We need to be sure we do that so we know who was here. And the other thing, I was just thinking about this, because the first meeting we had conflicts, and obviously we have conflicts in this one. So I'm looking for the day when we can all be in one place. And I'm thinking perhaps, since it has been kind of, some are here, some are not, maybe at our next meeting we ought to build in a time to have a legislative discussion among people, because we don't need to get too far down the road and then people go like, well, I still don't get it. Because this is something new, and this is something we're going to have to convince people of. And we are not pretending we know everything that we don't. But we know enough to know we've left too many billions of dollars on the table, we know that. So I'm thinking maybe the next time we meet, we ought to try to do that so that everybody eventually will all be on the same page, if that makes sense to y'all. And the big question is, do you think that will be helpful to the legislators? That's the question, but we don't want to do it if we don't think we've done it. And I mean, that's the big thing I was thinking about, and we get signed in, and if anybody has any pressing questions right now, because we're going to be moving about in just a minute, everything that's going on. And to ask you to please help Les and me out, and John, I should recognize we have our staff over there who came down here and made everything. Following us around the stadium as we go. So I appreciate the work that you guys are doing to be helpful to us. And Les, anything else that anybody has any questions or if you have a suggestion, we're here for that as well.
Yeah, and just, especially people from here, we want to make sure that I mean, if you would, get me things that are arts and things that contribute to the economy here that we can add to a list that we want to compile as part of our report. So help us not miss anything that's a key attraction, things that people ought to see when they come to Pine Bluff, Jefferson County, and surrounding area. Help us make sure we get everything.
And we've had several people who are not a part of the boot camp, who came to the last meeting who want us to come meet in their place. And so now we're kind of in a tussle. Want to be sure we are honoring geography on the state. Some of that will probably come coincide where someone we live, and it may not. Because we were hoping we could do, I know some of it characterizes as you know, we're doing, I forgot what it's called, but just kind of, I don't know how to it was so insulting, I forgot it, that's what my brain looks, I guess. But we want to be doing the best we can to get in different areas of the state, and when we go to those areas, we're going to be concentrated most on those areas.
I think that's really important. Madam Chair, the suggestion just talk about that would be, maybe we could find a time when, like the county associations having their big meeting, or the municipal leagues having their meeting, or something like that, and we could have a meeting, you know, that brings in those participants. So, you know, as we go to different meetings, how people will watch us and maybe do something like that. That might be a good way of also spreading it out as far as participants, convention members can watch our meetings.
That's very good food for thought, because this is something that is so different. We're going to make a whole lot more people understand what we're talking about.
Yes, Madam Chair. Is the Johnson Museum close to here that honors John Johnson? I know UAPB under the former chair of the Education Committee really worked hard to make sure that we preserve the home of John Johnson, the Family Ebony magazine. Is that within this area? I know it's Arkansas City somewhere.
It's Arkansas City for sure.
So it's not Jefferson County. Arkansas City is not in Jefferson County.
No, it's in the Shea.
But the Shea Mine.
It's in the Shea County, it's probably about 75 miles.
Oh, okay. I'm just looking because I know that it was a huge, huge project. The former president, the acting president of UAPB, that's why I was asking about that particular thing. And most folks do not realize that it probably was one of the first millionaires from this area. And so just wanted to get.
Well, that gets back to the storytelling. You know, when say if you're in, I don't know, why do I keep thinking Corning? I guess because I'm so impressed that drove all the way down here. I mean, why would, if you think about it this way, why would anybody go to Corning and not go in the store? Because that's one of the reasons we keep saying, nobody comes here, nobody cares.
I hadn't been here in like 15 years, and I told Mayor Washington the difference. My dad died in 2002. My whole family's from here. There was like Bill Gandy, I don't know if that was part of my dad's family. There was Bales, Johnsons. I mean, I had to come, you know what I mean? It's been so long since that connection, and I hadn't been here, so I wanted to see the changes, and I hadn't got to just roam around, so. It's good to be able to come down here and get paid for it. and get to see where, you know, things that I hadn't seen in a while because, you know, the family connection is lost there, so.
But I wanted to jump in with Representative Dalby's comment about our meetings. We really had a little bit of a difficult time because the week of ALC was blocked off, and we were pretty much told that the first week of the month was basically the week we could meet, because there were conflicts pretty much everywhere else. But if we do it in conjunction with some other things, that's a great idea. That could work.
And that's what people all over the state who are not in the legislature to see. I talked about our group at the rural development. I happened to be on Brianne was on that committee, on that legislative panel, and it was rural development, and I made a statement, you have art. You know, it might be a mural in the sale barn in Louisville, Arkansas, but there's somebody that's going to want to see the murals and start thinking how you can bring the art, whether it's visual or whatever, in your rural area, that people are going to want to make that little 20-mile jog off the main road to see. So we have been trying to get the word out, and Brianne and I kind of visited about that some at that meeting.
And we could